Great. Thank you, and thank you for your presentations. Thank you, Cathaoirleach. This first is to the IUA. You said in your opening statement that students from less well-off backgrounds are more likely to suffer from mental health issues, and that financial pressure is the leading contributing factor to mental health issues. Now, we all know that rent is now one of those biggest barriers to third-level education and one of the greatest causes of financial difficulty, not just for students. Would you agree that the housing crisis in general and student accommodation crisis is contributing to mental health issues of students? And is there any sign that those that have to move out to travel for college are more likely to suffer from mental health issues? Because I've been contacted by many students and parents from smaller towns and from rural areas that are really struggling, and I know the pressure that puts on those people. So are we kind of just your experience, and are we measuring that? And also I'm very concerned about a number of students who've contacted me who wanted to defer because they couldn't get accommodation at their colleges, and then they are being told, or there's blocks being put in the way of them deferring. They're told they have to go ahead. And also then the financial implications in terms of SUSI and the maybe not qualifying for SUSI the following year and all that. I just think there's a huge crisis and a problem there, and then the system is set up in a way that further exaggerates what's happening to the particular students that I'm talking to. Thanks.
You raised some very important questions, many kind of somewhat embedded in one another. I suppose your core piece is to what extent is the current crisis with regard to accommodation and the financial impact of that playing into the mental health of our current students. Well, we haven't actually measured that at the moment, but I'm sure that if we did, we would see that there are those that are struggling with accommodation, particularly with commuting, that they don't actually benefit from the education experience to the extent of those that are either closer and can get to the campus, whatever campus that is, more easily, or afford to live on campus or afford to live close. So you're right, it is a crisis that we have nationally at the moment, and I think we need government to actually really begin to tackle the issue of accommodation where possible for those living who need to commute. I think that's one of the big drivers, is how do we invest in the campuses that we have to actually provide accommodation for those who have to travel distances to their campus. The other piece, and it's not just the mental health, but it's also the social development, that if you have to commute. So those students who can either live close to the campus and get to the campus easily, or those who live on campus, they're able to engage in all of the things that all of our higher education institutions offer, both whether it's publicly funded or otherwise, in terms of the development of an individual. Because I'm a firm believer that the academic classroom is only one point of a college experience. The broader college experience is also, how do I develop as a person so that when I leave, I've actually gained all of these other resources other than just the academic qualification, which in itself may be just a starting point for many of our students who may change careers, as we know, multiple times, but it's the development that you get while you're being on campus. So it's how do we try and balance those two things. And I know most universities, certainly from talking to the registrars in the IUA group, what we're trying to do is see what can we put in place for those students who need to commute. How do we know what are the things that we can try and alleviate or mitigate against somebody who commutes quite a length of time? Can we have our campuses open earlier to support them, have kind of places to relax, better access to maybe showering facilities? So it doesn't alleviate the crisis, but it does help us maybe mitigate in the short term.
Because what I'm concerned about as well is even, I'm hearing about people dropping out, and this is apprenticeships as well. And what that then says to people, if they're forced to drop out because of their financial circumstance, having to commute, no accommodation, you're saying to those students, you have failed at this. And how are we picking up and looking after those students and those young people who haven't failed, and certainly through no fault of their own? And how are we keeping them in that, of encouraging them to look at the factors outside, that it is not their fault that they are caught up in this crisis and the mental health impact that it's going to have on them,
Well, I'm sure each here, and I know certainly from the supports that higher education institutions put in place, if they know a student is going to drop out, generally they will try and support. First of all, the primary thing was, can you keep them? The whole point is, how do we support students to stay connected, stay progressing with their program? That's the number one priority. Most institutions, where they can, if they have student assistance funds, welfare funds, they will endeavour to try and support as best they can. But again, it's resources, and there is a limited pool of resources given to institutions. And again, maybe during the pandemic, a lot of those resources were increased significantly. They were significantly cut back this year, so the amount of funding that came in to support students in need was dramatically reduced, and therefore a greater number of them are probably having to pull out due to the, say, economic circumstances that last year we may have been in a better position to support.
Yeah, I agree. You know, sometimes the figures are played about with, because we have the Students' Assistance Fund that would say have been increased so much since it, and it has increased. But it hasn't increased to the extent that it's presented that it's increased, and the expectation is there for students. Also, there are students now at college from families who never ever thought they would have to access a student assistance fund. So we have the smaller fund, and we have to make it stretch much wider than it can stretch at the moment. So I'm really glad to hear your contribution today, and I think everybody needs to work together. But it is a matter of resources, and I haven't got to my question. I know I haven't time in this slot. I mean, the answer to all of this is multi-annual funding, core funding.
Absolutely.
Not bits and pieces of money, core funding that we can engage and employ proper people, because proper people there, but people on a long-term basis, proper contracts to be able to provide the supports that we need. It is, as I see it, completely a resource issue here that needs to be dealt with. An investment issue, I would say.
I would agree. And just to add, it's not, the counsellors are one piece, but also all our institutions have other support networks right across the system that are there to identify a student who may be struggling. How do you step in? But again, that's a resource issue. So it is back to funding and how do we adequately resource. And we know globally, one of the 35, if you look at lost economic output, the number one lost economic output is due to mental health difficulties. And if we're able to actually do something and support students at a time where they can potentially contribute to society afterwards, that's a gain not just for the institutions and people working with them, it's a gain to society. So I think we have an imperative to actually invest properly.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you, Cathaoirleach.